with the man of the hour, the man I definitely want to talk to, Daniel Lazare. Daniel Lazare is an independent journalist and author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, government, social policy in general. He's written several books, including The Frozen Republic, The Velvet Coup, and America's Undeclared War. Daniel, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. How you doing this morning?
Just fine. How are you?
I'm doing great, better that you are with me. You have been my person to talk to about the events that were taking place in Europe, effectively European politics, because it has gotten rather fascinating, especially Georgia. So the Georgian prime minister who said she was never going to leave has left. I'm sorry, the Georgian president who said she was never going to leave has finally left. And all of the coup attempts and everything else, it seems that the Maidan 2.0 has effectively failed. Now, the government that's in place now is saying that they're going to look back at the previous government for crimes to see whether any crimes had taken place in the previous government. Apparently, the previous president or the previous prime minister is in jail, and they're looking back to see whether or not there's anybody else associated with the crimes that had taken place and whether or not there's anybody else that needs to be prosecuted. What's going on with this? I'm fascinated with Georgia just because of everything that's been taking place along the lines of former president, A, not wanting to leave, and B, trying to overthrow the government. I saw that in Ukraine, and you can see what was taking place in Ukraine when that happened. What is going on in Georgia around these prosecutions?
Well, yeah, the Ukraine comparison is appropriate. I mean, the two countries in certain respects are similar. The Ukraine is much bigger by a factor of 10, but nonetheless, it's a former Soviet state that broke away and where power has been seized by nationalists, pro-Western nationalists, anti-Russian, and the result was a brutal war, which is now, nearing its third anniversary. It's been horrible. Georgia is another state, and there's been a battle between pro-Western forces and pro-Russian forces, and the pro-Russian forces are now winning. They won an election in October pretty convincingly. There were weeks and weeks of protests that have now died away. The former president, whose name is Salome Zarabishvili. How's that for my?
Yeah, I didn't want to try to pronounce that.
She vowed not to step down, but has now stepped down. So the new government is stronger. It's pursuing an independent policy, and as part of that policy, it is launched an investigation into its former president named Mikhail
Saakashvili.
Yes, I'm sorry. And he was a neocon who became president in 2004 by virtue of a color revolution called the Rose Revolution in Georgia, and he imposed neoliberal policies, budget cuts, major budget cuts, all kinds of pro-market reforms, so-called. The results were pretty impressive initially. Although there was and also at the same time, there was strong economic growth, but also dramatic increases in economic polarization. And he blundered into a war with Russia over a breakaway province called South Ossetia, and got his butt kicked, to be put it as simply as possible. And he was then thrown out, but he then went to Ukraine, came back to Georgia, was involved in various kinds of no good activities, is now in jail in Georgia. The government is launching a criminal investigation into some of his less savory acts while he was in office. So it's an attempt to consolidate power, to see to it that the forces that lost the election remain out of power, do not try to disrupt activities, and that's what's happening. So they're trying desperately to avoid a Ukrainian outcome where they are dragged into a civil war, into a war with Russia that they cannot possibly remotely win. And they're trying to steer clear of that. And it looks like they may succeed. None of this is meant as an endorsement of the Georgian dream, the ruling party, which is, very conservative in many respects. But they do seem to have popular backing, and they have a right to pursue an independent national policy.
Is it fair to say, I mean, I know people use the term pro-Russian, but is it pro-Russian or just nationalist? Meaning we care about our own self-interest and attacking or getting involved in wars, not enough self-interest. Meaning it's not so much pro-Russian, it's just pro-Georgia, if that makes sense. Or do you agree with that?
I agree with it totally. I mean, Georgia lives in the real world, just like the rest of us do. They're a country of, I think, 3.7 million people, next to a country of 170 odd million people, and they've got to get along. I mean, this is life. This is, if you're Canada, if you're Mexico, you gotta get along with that colossus in between, the U.S. The U.S. shouldn't bully those countries around, although in fact, of course, it does. But they've got to manage that relationship, and Georgia can't. It'd be insane for Georgia to provoke hostilities with Russia, in behalf of the United States, located 6,000 miles away. It would be insane. And so the Georgian government, the Georgian Dream Party, wants to avoid that outcome. They don't want to see themselves destroyed. They don't want to see a generation of young people, perish in the trenches.
Yeah, they're rational. It's just a rational act. Yeah,
does that make them cowards? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It's the NATO point of view in this is like, hey, why don't you want to fight the Russians? And it's like, why would we want to do that? Like, it's not in our best interest. One of the other issues also is the election that's coming up in Germany. The Scholz government has collapsed. And in the context of that collapse, the AFD is one of the parties that is shockingly, and I'm saying shockingly because, 10 years ago, this would be mind-blowing, just like Marine Le Pen's party, like 10 years ago. It would be unheard of that you would be this close to political power. But the AFD has been, at the very least on the foreign policy front and in the energy front, sane for whatever, their anti-immigration stance. And that has gained a certain amount of popularity in Germany. And honestly, not just in Germany. I know this is not the AFD in Austria, but also the right-wing parties in Austria have also gained prominence due to issues of immigration and some of the foreign policy things that are taking place in Europe. The AFD, though, is fascinating. There was a conversation recently between an AFD leader and Elon Musk that is freaking Europe out. And, this gets to somewhat the weirdness with Europe, where they was talking about like all of these institutions that were studying the phone call and conversation with Elon Musk and the AFD leader to see if any kind of metrics in Twitter was taking place in order to boost it and stuff. Just utterly insane stuff. But what do you make of Elon Musk's, attack on these European leaders? Whether it's Keir Starmer, who's weak and hated in the UK, or whether it's Scholz in Germany, with these kind of conversations with the AFD leader. I've been fascinated with Elon Musk's, what is this? A taste of political power that has gone to his head, and the things that he's been saying, and the kind of the aggressiveness that he's been taking against other world leaders. Give me your take on this. For one, start off, do you think it's going to have any kind of effect in Germany that he's having a conversation with this leader? And for that matter, what do you think the AFD's chances are in Germany in this election in general?
Oh, it has a huge effect. First of all, by the way, I don't think that Keir Starmer is hated.
You don't think so?
No, he's holding in there. He's has a base of support. He was elected by a plurality. I don't see him being especially unpopular. The economy is not doing well, but I don't see any kind of wellspring of anger, such as, for example, we've seen in Canada against Trudeau.
Trudeau. Yeah.
So I don't see him in the same position. I think what's happening, I think this is really fascinating and really important. There was a report out recently that the world's 500 richest individuals now have a collective wealth of $9.8 trillion.
Wow.
That's a lot of money. And 1.5 trillion of that is in the last year. So these ranks of the capitalist class, the bourgeoisie, are feeling their oats, and they are backing Trump 110%.
Yeah.
And Trump is the billionaires candidate. Elon Musk, by the way, one of the latest figures on his wealth, $450 billion. That's nearly $500 billion.
He's going to be the first $1 trillion man.
Yeah,
in a few years.
Astonishing. So he is so wealthy and so powerful in this ultra-capitalist atmosphere we're in that he thinks that he can use his money to overthrow governments, and overthrow governments not in some impoverished, African or Latin American country, but overthrow governments in the heart of the advanced industrialized world. Germany and Britain. It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
The AFD, the Alternative for Deutschland, is roughly speaking, a quasi-semi-Nazi party.
Yes.
With vehement anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant stances, and Musk is boosting them, and I think that in today's climate, that will carry a lot of weight. And he's also declared war on Keir Starmer, and I think in today's climate that carries weight as well. So I think that what we're seeing is these ultra capitalists flexing their muscle, using their financial power and translating that into political power. And I think it's extraordinary. I think we're seeing a blow off here, because I think the speculative economy is extremely unstable. I think we're heading for a super 2008. But nonetheless, this money power is reaching extraordinary political dimensions.
I've never seen anything like it. Under normal circumstances, the billionaire class stays behind the scenes. Like the first time I saw a billionaire come out for political reasons was Bloomberg. When they were running in the race, Joe Biden wasn't doing all that well. Bloomberg gets in the race like he's going to be a savior for the Democratic Party. He spends $1 billion in a primary for like 6 months, gets humiliated, flames out. This is pretty shocking where these guys are coming from behind the scenes and saying, yes, we're putting $50 million into a political candidate, or, APAC, I'm putting $100 million into political candidates. Like, this is a massive amount of money where they are no longer kind of staying behind the scenes. They are actually coming to the forefront with their particular candidates. I've never seen anything like it. I guess the question for the AFD, please.
I think in 1924, if I'm correct, there was a boomlet about running Henry Ford for president.
Really?
And Henry Ford, I'm pretty sure this is correct. And Henry Ford was one of the richest men in the world at that time. This is at the height of the Model T, which were rolling off the assembly line, one a minute. So he was a fantastically wealthy guy by that point, and the U.S. in the 1920s was in the grips of this right-wing Republican political system, which worship money. What's good for GM is good for America. So therefore, there was a boomlet in his behalf. But this is far greater, far greater. This leaves that in the dust.
Well, do you think the AFD has a chance of winning this election?
I think it has a good chance. I think they probably will strengthen their position and then emerge as a kingmaker. In other words, they they will be able to determine the makeup of the next government. The next government will be an AFD influenced government. In Austria, the Freedom Party, which is the rough equivalent, is in the process of taking the lead in forming a new government. So that's pretty amazing. But Germany, of course, is a much bigger country. But yeah, I think the AFD will likely emerge as the kingmaker.
It's funny. I told my ex-girlfriend that was going to happen in Austria. She didn't believe me. And a year later, government collapses, the new government comes in, the right-wing government takes over. And again, this is not that I love it one way or the other. It's just Europe they have gotten so far ahead of their skis in regards to what it seems like the public wants. I mean, even in the European elections that took place, there was a sea change. And, at the end of the elections, when they started electing their members again, you get von der Leyen right back at the top, despite the fact that all of these, it made a clear voice that they wanted something different in all of these countries in the European elections. Give me your take on that. I mean, do you think they're just not listening? Do you think that these change of governments, whether it's the AFD, whether it's Le Pen or that party gaining more seats, whether you think it's Meloni in Italy, do you think that the fact that these governments seems to be changing is going to affect the larger politics of the European Union? Or do you think for the most part, the orthodoxy is going to remain in control?
Oh, no, I think it'll have an effect, a big effect. The EU politics are buffered. The people like von der Leyen are indirectly related, so they sort of carry on despite what's happening at the base. But that doesn't go on indefinitely. Eventually, she'll feel the heat and will wind up succumbing. So yeah, I would think that it'll change the politics of the EU and will change the politics of NATO too. That's really important. I mean, NATO is in crisis. I mean, because you have Donald Trump.
He's raising their rent 5%. I mean, he's raising their yeah. He's raising their
first, Joe Biden blew up Nord Stream, and now Donald Trump is declaring war on Denmark.
Yeah. Yeah.
So NATO.
Just for the audience can hear that comment, to give some kind of context in case they were living under a rock and they hadn't heard Donald Trump say this. He basically was at the press conference and was saying, "Hey, we need Denmark for our national security. We believe in freedom. We believe in freedom, and we need to protect the free world. Let's play."
Well, we need Greenland for national security purposes. I've been told that for a long time, long before I even ran. I mean, people have been talking about it for a long time. You have approximately 45,000 people there. People really don't even know if Denmark has any legal right to it. But if they do, they should give it up because we need it for national security. That's for the free world. I'm talking about protecting the free world. You don't even need binoculars.
I love this notion. I do this to protect the free world. That's why we need it. We need you to give it to us to protect the free world. What do you make of this? I mean, and are we in this kind of new era of gangster politics? Is that what's going on? We need Denmark. And oh, by the way, we need to annex Canada and Mexico. Hey, we need you too. It'd be great if all of us can form into just one supercontinent.
And the guy hasn't even taken office yet.
Right. He's not even in office. Right.
I think we are entering into a new era of gangster politics. It reminds me of the early 1930s. I mean, Hitler took over the Sudetenland, the German-speaking portion of Czechoslovakia, to defend freedom, as he put it. And Trump is doing this as well. Now he's picking on. I mean, that's a classic bully behavior. He's not threatening to invade China, but he's threatening to invade, Denmark and Greenland and Panama. It's extraordinary. And NATO. I mean, what does NATO even mean in this context?
I have no idea.
we are really entering into a storm here, a real storm. So, batten down the hatches.
Well, dig into that for me. What do you mean a storm? I've pointed out that the world seems strange right now. You get South Korea, where the guy tries to declare martial law and literally take over. I mean, literally trying to provoke a war with North Korea, even to the point of disappearing his political enemies in the country to blame the North Koreans. I mean, just outlandish stuff that was being uncovered in South Korea. You get what's taking place in Syria, where you just get this complete collapse of that government. You get the complete collapse of that government. Then you get the situation in Lebanon, where Israel goes on a killing spree in Lebanon, Gaza, West Bank, with the world just kind of standing there and watch. You get Georgia, where they tried to literally overthrow that government. You get Romania, where they kill that election because of TikTok videos that ended up coming out of the Liberal Party. It wasn't even coming from the Russians. And you get the overthrow of the Ukrainian government in 2014 with the subsequent invasion by Russia. Like, this world, it's like this facade of international law seems to be waning, in a very strange way that hasn't necessarily been, I guess, acknowledged yet. But give me your take on that. How do you view this?
And to be fair, you also have Hamas killing 350 people at a rock concert in the name of freedom and brotherhood.
1,200, yeah.
But 350 young people at a rock concert mowed down by guns. I think that what we're seeing is a dramatic lurch to the right, and the eruption of all kinds of intra-right battles, where these various forces go at one another, and each one is so right-wing that you don't know you don't know
who to root for.
Precisely right. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary. And I think that the entire world system is lurching to the right, and I think it's very significant. So I think it's part of the storm that we're seeing, and I think that Trump is going to just blow things up. I really do. I think that the opening shots at Mexico, Panama, Canada, and Denmark are extraordinary, completely unprecedented in the post-war period. Really brings us back to the dark days of the 1930s. I think that we don't know what's in store in terms of immigrants here in the U.S., but I think there's every reason to fear the worst. And I think we'll see a huge number of attacks on social welfare, environmental protection. I mean, the global climate crisis is real. We see this in Los Angeles. This is not. No one's making those fires up. This is not. These are not images that are being manufactured. This is real, all too real. A major city going up in flames, and that is because Southern California is in the midst of a 7 or 8 month drought that has turned their woodlands into tinderboxes, and they have now exploded in flame, and the forces are really converging in a very dramatic and powerful way.
The irony of it is that there was a document that the U.S. government made under the Trump administration dealing with climate change. And, for all the talk about it's a hoax and everything else, in the climate document, they pointed, I think they estimated out to like 50 years or something, and said the temperature will be up by 10 degrees, but we can't do anything about it anyway. So, we shouldn't, we should just try to exploit the resources, which goes back to the whole Greenland thing of, hey, we can now extract those resources from that territory or from, the Arctic or from wherever else, now that these things have melted as a result of the temperature increasing. It's astonishing. One point, though, you said you believe that we're in a bubble like in 2008, that this is going to somehow fall apart. Now, to be fair, we're what, 36 trillion in debt. I think we're putting on 2 trillion per year at this point. And Musk, who was supposed to cut 2 trillion from the deficit, it's like, good luck with that, has come out saying, yeah, I don't think I'll be able to do that for obvious reasons. If it's 2 trillion, it's there for a reason, meaning, they're not just making that up. There may be pork in the budget, but much of those resources are there because somebody put them there for some kind of reason. Why do you believe that we're at the cusp of somewhat of a breakdown? Is it just because we can't keep going in this way where we're putting trillions of dollars on the deficit without really doing anything to do anything about it? I mean, we're fundamentally holding an empire across the globe, and we're paying for it with funny money. But what's your thoughts?
Well, in 2008, in the years leading up to 2008, from roughly 2004 on, the Fed kept interest rates very, very low. Alan Greenspan kept interest rates very low. Alan Greenspan was seen as the second coming of Jesus. I mean, literally, there was some congressional hearing where a member of Congress, just thanked him profusely for running the economy so well. He kept interest rates low, and you saw this fantastic wave of speculation that was, broadly speaking, based on real estate, based on mortgages, and it kept growing bigger and bigger and bigger, and everyone was kind of happy because a lot of people were making, a lot of money off of it. And it was thrilling, it was wonderful until it wasn't, until the whole structure crashed, starting in 2007. And now we're seeing things like, with Bitcoin, the Trump administration basically is Bitcoin Inc. His two leading economic members of his cabinet, Lutnick in the Department of Commerce and Besant in the Treasury, are both Bitcoin fans. His two sons, he and his two sons, have formed a Bitcoin venture with Witkoff, who was his general Middle East emissary, another member of his administration. They're talking about the U.S. Treasury investing in Bitcoin, which will presumably drive the price higher and higher. So I think we're seeing almost a leveraged buyout, a Bitcoin takeover of the federal government, where federal economic power is being used to pump this bubble higher and higher. Meanwhile, real estate is out of control. The real estate market is frozen. I know, many young people in New York City who are just simply unable to find a place to live because the rents have just zoomed to levels far beyond, anything they can remotely afford. Real estate is zooming. Crypto is zooming, the stock market is zooming, and the economy in general, the country in general, is doing lousy, as, for example, Los Angeles shows, and the teetering insurance industry in California. So there's a widening gap between reality and Wall Street fantasy. And I just think that as a sign of deepening instability, and I think that we're going to see a blowout that will make that'll make 2008 seem like a warm up.
I want you to. Oh, please! I'm sorry. I thought you were.
It will likely take place while Trump is in office. So therefore, the political implications will be very powerful.
Add to that technology. And the reason I'm saying add to that technology, in the next 10 years, AI is probably going to get rid of thousands of jobs across the United States. And that's including especially driving jobs. The moment that you get automated cars, an Uber doesn't require a driver, a Lyft doesn't require a driver, trucks don't require drivers. Those people are going to have to find something else to do. even things like YouTube. I mean, some of the AIs today are astonishing. Like the similarities with human beings. You can imagine that's only going to get more and more sophisticated over the course of time, where those things get trained to do various jobs. And like any good capitalist, if I can put a computer in or a robot in for a nickel less, I'm going to put that robot in for a nickel less. It allows me to maximize my profit. That nickel less for that one person ends up being millions of dollars over the context of an entire corporation. And, you know, I know for myself as when I was doing software, a software engineer, there were applications and projects that we did that literally eliminated the need for various people. I remember there was one application I did that like got rid of the need for like 3 people because it was just more efficient at doing that particular task, where you only needed one person to kind of look at it. We can see it in checkout counters, where you go to the store today. That's probably the thing that's in our face the most, where you do your own groceries and you might have 1 or 2 lanes that are open. You have one person that's handling like 5 different lanes because people are checking themselves out. Okay, well, those are jobs in the next iteration of that business that you're not hiring for anymore. And you extrapolate that through the entirety of the country, or for that matter, the world. You can imagine a large sum of jobs are just going to be eliminated without any political means to deal with the fact that those jobs are eliminated. Like that has to be factored into that. How do you see society adjusting in any way elegantly to deal with that new reality that's coming about? The reason why I bring this up, my ex wanted to do a YouTube channel, but she didn't want her face on the channel. And I found this kind of AI that you can write it and it would say it. It would give you human mannerisms. It would match a person's movements. So let's say if you did a video, but you didn't want yourself to be in the video, you can make a cartoon figure and you can map it to your own movements to give it these kind of human-esque movements with a certain voice, with inflection and everything else. It looks fundamentally like a person because it's mimicking a person. And she saw that and it was like, okay, why am I doing this? Like meaning it's so dispiriting to look at that and think to yourself, okay, this is intruding into human affairs. But that is going to be a reality that we're all going to have to deal with on some level. What is your take on that? Do you see society in any way accommodating that? And the reason why you're a perfect person to ask for this, you're a critic of the U.S. policy, and this is a political issue, less a business issue.
Yeah. Over the history of capitalism, which at this point is roughly 250 years, there have been dramatic changes in technology. Dramatic, obviously. Steam power, electrical power, nuclear power, etc. But they have actually created more jobs rather than doing away with jobs. I mean, the industrial proletariat has gone from a few thousand people in northern England to now billions of people around the globe. So technology doesn't eliminate jobs. Technology actually creates jobs by expanding labor power. Now, nonetheless, the road gets very complicated. There are lots of twists and turns. Productivity has been lagging in recent decades. It's not at all clear what impact AI will have on that. AI is very promising, but so far no one really knows what AI is going to do. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone agrees that it's amazing, but no one really knows what it's going to do. So it's a faith-based judgment at this point. So I don't know what impact AI will have 10 years from now. I presume it'll have a big impact, but precisely what that will be, I really don't know. And I don't think anyone else does either. In fact, a very good economics blogger named Michael Roberts had recently attended a major economics conference in which AI was a big topic of discussion. And the audience was evenly divided between those who say it'll accomplish miracles, those who say it'll do nothing, and those who are shaking their head in puzzlement in between. So no one knows. So we'll see what happens. But I do really think the economy, the capitalist economy, we've been in a decades-long slowdown. The economy since 2008 has weakened visibly. The U.S. is doing relatively well, but accent on the word relatively, because it's by its own standards, its performance has weakened. It looks better compared to Europe, but only because they have weakened more. And as the economy weakens, the political structures that are erected on the basis of that economy are weakening too. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing guys like Schultz, who in better times would have been perfectly adequate as a chancellor. Now they look really weak and and foolish. The same thing goes with Macron, with Starmer, with Joe Biden, who was in his final days here and looks like an idiot. And it reminds me, by the way, I wrote an article a couple of years ago, and everyone told me I was exaggerating ridiculously. I compared Joe Biden to Konstantin Chernenko. Konstantin Chernenko was a Soviet leader who was elected in 1982. He was so sickly and weak when he was elected that he could barely even climb up the podium. And he lasted in office like 15 months. He was in the hospital the entire time, and finally died. And he personified perfectly the Soviet system in the mid 80s as it was just running out of steam. But what does Joe Biden represent?
Yeah,
I mean, this guy is this is the same thing. This guy is barely coherent. A federal prosecutor about a year ago ruled that this guy, you couldn't even put him on a witness stand because he was simply incapable of testifying, in a coherent manner. And so doesn't he personify the rot at the heart of the U.S. system? I mean, if Chernenko did, with regard to the Soviet system, then I think much the same can be said with regard to the U.S. system. In fact, to take it further, I think that what we're seeing around the globe is a crash of neoliberalism that reminds me of the crash of Soviet communism in 1989 to 91. So we're seeing that the neoliberal center is collapsing, and all kinds of right-wing forces are rising up and preparing to take over. Now, there's going to be absolute chaos as a result, but that's what seems to be happening.
That is a great summary of it. I think that's a great summary of it, a crash of neoliberalism. And I guess the question becomes what comes after? And like you said, chaos as we come into some kind of new world order. Daniel, man, thank you for this great rundown. I really appreciate this. Yeah, awesome rundown. I don't have anything else to say about it. I really appreciate it. Always appreciate your commentary. I really do. Daniel Lazare. He is an independent journalist and author, best known as a critic of the U.S. Constitution, American politics, government, and social policy in general. He's written several books, including The Frozen Republic, The Velvet Coup, and America's Undeclared War. You can follow Daniel on Twitter at DHLazare, and you can find his column on weeklyworker.co.uk and strategicculture.org and many others. Man, thank you for this, Daniel. I hope you're having a good year so far. I appreciate you joining me.
So far.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you very much.
So far. Let's hope it keeps going. Have a good one, man.